Hi, it's Andy.
Hi, it's Dave.
Hi, it's Kirk.
Welcome to the A.D.K, a rock and metal channel. Okay, so today's video, we are reviewing the new album by Solnegre. It's called The Spiral Labyrinth. It comes out on the 6th of October. We're going to do it track by track breakdown, if that's okay with you guys, Andy and Kirk.
Yep.
Good, I'm glad. Now, they are a death doom band, Spanish. We did their video Vessel Part 1 the night within last week, so we did a review of that particular video, which was really interesting. Had a really interesting midsection on it. So yeah, let's go check out. Well, let's just go and talk through the actual album itself. So Vessel Part 1 opens up the album, and it's called The Night Within. So Andy, what did you think? Obviously, we reviewed this last week.
Yeah, much like the Krieger one that we've covered on this session as well. It was a pleasure to review. It wasn't a chore because this is Doom Death Doom, which is my sort of my one of my favourite genres, and I've really enjoyed the album. And I put the old man reading glasses on because I've got lots of notes on the individual songs. But the opening track, Vessel, as you said, we reviewed the video recently, and following on from what I wrote from that is big doomy riffs, with a sort of 3 minutes of calm sort of ambience to sort of start the song with subtle keyboards and strings, and then when the tape and then it's got the sort of powerful vocals and typical death doom riffs. But then what sort of I mentioned in the video as well, the midpoint where the tempo drops and it's very, again, mood inducing and calm, lovely guitars and everything. And Kirk, I think when I was shooting the video, the band sort of took your quote of saying that it transitions from Dave Gilmour to Yngwie Malmsteen, which is a very encapsulating statement, I think, because that sound very, the sort of rock virtuoso solo sounded very out of place, and it's something that I didn't like. I think the guy is very talented, and he should perhaps take that element away from this band and sort of do a solo project focusing on that. but yeah, excellent opening song. That particular sort of middle guitar part where it sort of slows down was very reminiscent of one of my favourite bands, Mournful Congregation. They explore that area quite a lot, but a great opening track.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you on that one. And I am going to literally try and just read. I'm going to read my notes as I wrote them. So interesting mix of a track. Real slow intro, but real chuggy, heavy guitars. I loved that. Had a lovely lead guitar melody. It's not overcomplicated. I know I referenced it before. I said it was Paradise Lost. I know, Kirk, you mentioned another band at the time. I can't remember who it was, but I'm sure you'll comment on it. But it reminded me of Greg McIntosh from Paradise Lost sort of playing. The midsection is a weird, eerie instrumental, which I really liked. The solo was great until it just went too much. It got too extreme, and it overpowered at that point. And I was interested going back and listening to this after we did the video review to see if my opinion had changed on that, and it hadn't. It still felt that way when I listened to it. It just didn't fit quite right for me. But the overall track, I love the guy's vocals. He's got so much clarity and weight in what he's putting across. Sometimes I feel like I'm sitting in a monastery and this guy is like some weird, twisted, evil monk in some big cathedral somewhere, just doing some sort of weird hymn thing at me, and I loved it. I thought that was great. Kirk?
Yeah, it's a good start to the album, isn't it? I think it was easier for me to digest this because I knew the song because we'd analysed it the week before. It's a bold statement, no matter what genre of music, to have a song of 11 minutes and 34 seconds as track number 1 on an album, and then to advertise the album as 8 songs on average 10 minutes each.
Yeah,
that's not going to be an easy listen. This one, yeah, I love the bloodthirsty change of attack around, I think it's the 4-minute mark. Leading up to that, you do have the sorrowful Death Doom, like My Dying Bride, early Anathema type sound, don't you? I hear Opeth in this as well.
Okay.
Yeah, his vocals stand out. I think the guitar solo keeps this song alive, but it is excessive. It starts at 7 minutes and 55 seconds, and it comes to an end at 10 minutes and 20 seconds. that just tells you how long it is. Fantastic imagination of the fretboard there. I was already worried by this point, though. I was like, there's no way I could listen to 8 songs like this. And unfortunately, this is a band that do understand dynamic shifts and ups and downs and changing tempos and mood. So good start, but at the same time, I was wondering, my God, have I got another 7 songs like this to be listening to, because there's no way I'm going to have the stamina to get through them.
Well, the next song was Vessel Part 2, The Day We All Failed. Andy.
The way they sort of flowed into each other, I thought was excellent. I know it's sort of Vessel Part 2, so it's kind of a sort of whole piece in itself. The vocals, picking up on what you said, Dave, I think the vocals, the harsh vocals in particular, are excellent throughout this album. They're powerful, but they are clear. You can pick out most of the lyrics. And the clean vocals he delivers in this one reminded me of Aaron Stainthorpe. Higher register than perhaps Aaron delivers it, but not as good. But later on in the album, there are clean vocals that I don't like, but the particular passages in this song where they're sort of, clean vocals, I really did enjoy. Again, there's an anguish scream in the song, which is an element of doom and death doom, which I always like. That the cry of anguish, the sorrow that he's trying to towards. Unfortunately for me, there's another virtuoso solo which I don't think has a place in this particular type of music. And as I said before, he's obviously talented. He wants to his band, but for me, it doesn't sit right. And there's blast beats as well. So there's different elements of this particular band. I think you use the word dynamics, Kirk. Otherwise, 8 songs of 10 minutes of the same standard and style of Vessel Part 1 would be grueling for anybody. So they do bring in elements that sort of mix it up for everybody, just to keep it interesting.
Okay. So I felt for Vessel Part 2, preferred this to Vessel Part 1 overall. Even though I liked Vessel Part 1, I thought this was really dramatic to start with. Felt somber, but also felt textured as well. There was layers in there. Great clean vocals, really like that. Also loved his guttural vocals. There was almost gravelly in his voice, so it wasn't just weighty. There was this grit to it, which I thought was great. It then had this nice tempo because it starts off really slow and sludgy, the song, and then it kind of just picks up at the on the second half, which kind of gets you going. Your head starts moving, and it just works really well how they've done like a slow first half and a more up-tempo second half. So you're not having 10 minutes of that same tempo all the way through like a funeral doom song. It just feels like they got that balance right of this track. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Kirk?
If they just did a cut and paste job and took track number 1 and track number 2 out of this album, it'd be a fantastic EP, wouldn't it? Because this song is 9 minutes and 25 seconds. So you're already at the 20-minute mark of these 2 tracks. And just in isolation, fantastic. This works really well as a sequel, doesn't it? Is he, at the beginning, the drummer, is he playing like rim shots? Like that high tune sound on the edge of the snare? Really, really gives you right texture to it. Clean guitars. Again, a baritone serenade, a voice, really impressive voice. Let's not forget, he's called Miguel Serra. This gentleman is Spanish, and his enunciation is excellent. It really is. I think the first challenging point for this is the transition at 3 minutes and 55 seconds, and they seem to tease a riff and then just go back to the first verse, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because I can hear some divine choir harmonies in the background. Like, I think it's interesting what you said. You feel like you're in a Belgian monastery, don't you, when you're listening to this? it really does have that heavenly presence to it. When I say heavenly, actually, it's probably the wrong word. Definitely an extra dimensional presence where you're looking for some kind of intercession between you and a god that you probably don't understand. Good acceleration at the end, and yeah, you're right, Andy, there's some blast beats and then some really, really grotesque vocal roaring towards the end, which I did not expect. So let's not forget the tempo. A lot of this is doom, but the key word in this is death as well, isn't it? And there's some really gory death metal moments in this, mischievous. And just one final thing I'll say here, when I was saying in the video, the difference between death doom and post metal, they're playing the same tempo, same tunings. The protagonists of these songs are often the people that are in control. They are playing God. They are voyeuristic and they're spying on this virgin woman that they're obsessed with, or they're going to use a knife and slit someone's throat. You don't get any of that in post metal. That's just traumatic music, isn't it? From people who have endured so much misery and they're still willing to fight back. Whereas here, they're outsiders to begin with in this type of music. You know, they're almost like got the Marquis de Sade in one hand, and then they've got the poetry of Baudelaire in the other. So I think it's a lot more highbrow intellectually, this music, but at the same time, not quite as interesting as that raw emotion that you get in post metal.
Okay. Next up was the end of All Things Endless. Andy.
Quite similar on this one. I just put it, it's death doom all day long with an obscure film sample in the middle just to break it up again. Maybe not quite as sort of grabbing as the first two tracks, which is why I probably didn't record much down in the way of notes, and I can't recall anything exceptional about it. But just another sort of staple track for the album. And as you say, maybe one that sort of got in just to extend the length when perhaps it wasn't required, Kirk, as we sort of got into an hour plus in running length and 20 minutes plus for the first two tracks.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of wrote down here, it was just good atmospheric intro, but very much like the midsection on Vessel Part 1. In fact, almost too similar for me. I was listening to that going, hang on, have I heard this before? When I was thinking, this does sound very much like, I'm sure I've just heard this exact same section on Vessel Part 1. So there might have been quite a few similarities in there. It does punch in with full somber doom and death and kind of expect what you expect from a doom death band. There are some nice, interesting little groove riffs smattered around the track to keep you from falling into a deep, dark doom state. Because I was kind of starting to feel that on this track. I was like, okay, this is feeling a little bit oppressive. Like, wow, okay, this is feeling a lot now. And then every so often you get like a kind of cool groove riff will come in just to kind of bring you out of it enough that you can kind of carry on going through it. As you said, because the songs are quite long. I actually liked the voiceover film part. I thought that was a nice touch with the clean guitars. I thought that helped break the song up. And it is one of my kind of, I'm going to say it now because it was in my kind of, there's a blueprint to this band. They do like a two-parter. They like to break their songs into two parts with a nice mids, and it's a very when you're looking at especially when you look at the audio visual, and you can see where all the song kicks in and where the quiet part comes in and where the next heavy bit comes in. You're like, wow, you can line these songs up and there's not a lot of variation between them. So they've almost used the blueprint on their tracks, and I started to get that vibe of it when I was listening to this. But yeah, there were some nice elements of it, but yeah, felt very somber and oppressive. This one a little bit too much for me. Kirk?
Well, the good news, this is only 7 minutes and 45 seconds, so the song lengths are coming down by the time we get to track number 3. My only criticism, I hear no other influence apart from My Dying Bride, but my God, the riffing is colossal in this song when it gets into its stride. So there is a lot to like in it. You're right. By this point, we know that the intro is going to be 1 minute, 30 seconds of textured interludes, almost like film pieces, because I heard keyboard sampling French horns and synth drones in there. And then when the doom comes in, that actually does make sense, but they seem to do that on every song on this album, so eventually it becomes predictable. I did like this. I have it as one of the standout songs. See, The paradox here is, if we're judging it as an album experience, a combined work, then it doesn't really have the intended impact. If we just look at these individually as songs, most of these are very strong, aren't they? So it really depends on what you look for in an album. But yeah, I was quite impressed. It's just, I mean, I love My Dying Bride, so does Andy. So I'm not going to be put off by that, but I just didn't hear any other influence on this song apart from Yorkshire's Finest.
Okay. Next up is Yours is the Legacy of Broken Glass and Poisoned Wells. Well, that's a hell of a song title. Andy.
I'll be handing straight over to you, Jay, because we had a bit of a technical issue regarding this one. Because the album I managed to put on a hard drive to play through the van, and I remember it being a really good track. But when it came down to sitting down, making notes and listening to another sort of medium, this one didn't appear. So okay. I've got nothing to say about this particular song, but I'm sure I enjoyed it.
Okay, well, I'll try this then. It is a guttural, sludgy, deathy doom track. It feels older to me. This just feels like a much more a dated style of death doom. So this feels like a 90s death doom to me, like late 90s. Whereas the earlier tracks had more atmospheric. So there was definitely more balance of synths and stuff. This one just felt more guttural, a bit more rawer. I did, again, second half of the song, it kind of started throwing in some 3/4 time signatures and stuff. And I was like, second half of the track, it changed it up a bit for me. And I kind of got more into it once it got past that. So it was an interesting track, but I wasn't as keen on it because it just didn't feel like it had the atmospheric elements that the earlier tracks had. And that was maybe intentional, but it did feel like a much more older style of Death Doom to me, with my vast knowledge of Death Doom, of course. Kirk?
Track number 4, 7 minutes and 23 seconds. So we are getting the timings down only by a matter of 20 seconds compared with track number 3. Good start to this. Really chunky Death Doom, vocals dominate for this. I think there's a real muscular stride to this song. They'll definitely play this one live. It could even be a good live setup to this, in my opinion. It's quite clever as well because they take the heavier riff and then when they revisit it after the chorus, they take out the palm muting so that you get these harmonies of guitar. I think he's just using a harmonizer pedal. Works really well. And it's impressive how they actually navigate between different tempos in this. It's very simple what they do in the first part. They'll just cut out to distorted guitars sliding along the fretboard for 20 seconds while they work out where they're going to go from there. I thought there was also an interesting insertion of progressive metal bass playing at some point. I think it's around the 4.5 minute mark, which I just did not expect. But there's no need for an extra minute at the end of this song of remorseful piano and synthesizers. You've already captured those emotions earlier on in the song. So very indulgent way to end the song. You should just get the mouse, click, and delete from your Pro Tools or whatever software you're using. Absolutely do not need that at the end of the song.
Okay. Next up, September 6th, 1995. Interesting song title. So obviously there's some sort of relevance to that date. Andy?
It may well be, but I couldn't find anything. I don't know if anybody else looked it up.
I'm hunting now, trying to find something, but
perhaps they'll be able to enlighten us, because aren't we having a chat with these guys sometime?
We are next week.
Oh, well, there you go. There's a question for them.
What's your song about?
Yeah,
probably the date of birth of one of the band members.
Maybe that is indulgence then. If that is the case,
rub it in, guys. Yeah, nice one. Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favourites. I think it's certainly the slowest and heaviest one on the album. Very My Dying Bride influences, I think, on this particular one, especially with the keyboards, and there were violins, but it may well be sort of, what's the word, Kirk? Sort of sampled violins or electronically generated string sounds there. But yeah, this is one of my favourites. Again, it's got another film sample, which really does benefit the song. Wouldn't be able to identify it, but it's probably some Spanish classic. I don't know, but yeah, what did I say? One of the best for me on this particular one. What's the song? What's the duration time? Is it coming down or going back up again?
Going back up, unfortunately, 9 minutes and 19 seconds.
Okay.
God, and it felt it. It really felt it. Jesus.
Struggling at this point, are you, Dave?
So for me, I put this on and I was like, yeah, okay. But starting, my notes are short, very slow, and I just couldn't get into it. It's almost funeral doom at this point, and that lost me. Yeah, it came up in tempo in the second half. Surprise, surprise. But by that point, I checked out on this track. It's just that slow funeral doom style. It's just not for me. Kirk.
There are some enjoyable moments in September the 6th, 1995. I actually heard a Celtic Frost Triptychon, special Triptychon type influence. What a surprise. I did manage to mention my favorite.
You've got Celtic in there.
Yeah. So if you look at the death doom genre, it probably starts with that debut Paradise Lost album from 1990, and the production's dreadful on that. And at the time, the band didn't really like that album and quickly moved on. And then a reappraisal 30 years later, you can see the influence that it's had. And when you get a band like Solnegre influenced by that, it's worth listening to because they've got better production, better equipment, and they can make the most of what Paradise Lost couldn't do on that 1990 debut. So I enjoyed it. The spoken word section in the middle song, that does help break it up. I'm surprised you didn't cling on to that, Dave.
I think I was asleep at that point.
See, but what about the drummer though? I thought he really went out of his way. I think it's halfway through, about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I was asleep by then.
Seconds. No, he was all over the place, and the bass player, really frenetic action. So I think they are aware that you can't just play 9 minutes of torturous funeral doom, and they try to do something about it. It's just too long. It doesn't need to be 9 minutes, even if the tempo is as slow as this. You could have finished this at 7 minutes and 30 seconds. So I'm going to use your saying and apply it to Death Doom. There's a good 7-minute song in here somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. The Waning Glow. Now, I'm going to say something before Andy says anything, just because I was going to say, you didn't like the clean vocals on this, did you, Andy?
Very poor is my description.
Okay.
Am I on now?
You can go ahead now. Yeah, give the rest of your feedback on this track.
I think the sort of vocals that are sort of delivered in different styles are the sort of key or main elements of this song. Because I haven't noted down anything other than the vocals at the opening part of the song are very depressive and suicidal black metal, sort of, you know, more high pitched sort of screams of anguish type vocals. But then, you know, there's clean vocals later on in the track, which, as I said, were poor. There's whoever the vocalist is, or maybe there's other vocalists sort of joining in, band members or guest vocals, but there's definitely the variation. There's some excellent harsh vocals that we can hear all the lyrics. There's some good clean vocals as well, and there's some really poor vocals as well, which I'm being sort of, you know, some areas you got to understand, but overall it's a really good album. I really enjoyed it, but I think he needs to sort of depart from, you know, the attempt at singing, if I'm perfectly honest. But again, another good track, but in the style of, again, mixing up the styles a bit, more death metal, more depressive and suicidal black metal in sort of delivery.
Okay. Yeah, so this was one of my favourite songs on the album. Which is, I knew that was going to be the case with us. we hardly ever agree on this, so that's always good. So this had like a kind of cool groove doom element to it early on. I loved it when the track picks up its tempo, and I loved it when the vocals went clean. It reminded me of Sisters of Mercy, and I was just like, yeah, I love that. That's cool. It went gothic. It went gothic doom. Yeah, loved it. And considering I really wasn't a fan of September 6th, 1995, I thought I hated that song. I'd have loved to have that song removed from the album. So they are playing to lots of different people. So I think as long as people like about 75% of their album, they're doing well. Because there's always going to be a couple of songs people are going to have differences of opinions on. But I really liked where he went with the vocals on it because it was different. But I also like all his other vocals that he's done as well. So I appreciate that he did something different on this particular track. So yeah, the Waning Glow. I love that song. Kirk.
They've managed to get a song below 7 minutes. 6 minutes and 45 seconds for track number 6, The Waning Glow. I like the intro. You can almost hear sampled organs, can't you? You know, and the keyboard textures. So very solemn. And I just imagined that, again, they could probably open the live set with this song as well, where they're behind the curtains when you hear the organ, and then the curtains lift and they just go into this really aggressive, crunchy, mid-tempo, metallic thrust, don't they? Yeah, great vocals on this. This is the one song where I can hear Gregor McIntosh of Paradise Lost in the way that they're formulating the melodies in the second guitar. I've just lost my stamina levels are at breaking point, though, unfortunately, at this point of the album. So as a song on its own in isolation, yeah, there's a lot to enjoy here, but I can't say that my enthusiasm levels were at the highest by the time I come to track number 6 and I realize there's still 2 more songs to go. They've basically got 2 albums worth of material here. Don't be self-indulgent, just split them up. Do part 1 and then 6 months later release part 2, or even leave it a year.
So would this have been
no need to have this many songs on the album?
So would this have been better to have done this as like 2 EPs instead and broken it into like 4-track EPs?
Possibly. I'll just do it or advertise it as a double
track
album.
albums.
CD1 and CD2.
Or do Vessel Part 1 and Vessel Part 2 as an EP, as you said, Dave, a long 20-minute EP, and then the rest as a follow-up album.
I have to say though, I would never be bored watching this music live.
No,
because I do like, you can just go to a gig on your own, stand with a pint in your hand. If you're wearing a hoodie, just put your hood up, and you can just stand there for an hour and absorb it. And it's a great feeling, isn't it? You can just be left alone. You're listening to music you enjoy. When you sit down with it, though, you don't have that same gratifying experience, in my opinion.
I'm just trying to talk to you, though, Kirk.
Yeah.
Standing there with your pint in your hand, absorbing the music. Somebody will tap you on your shoulder.
I know, yeah. Someone will break the torture. Someone will break the
okay, second to last. Song for the Inert Part 1. Andy.
Again, I've sort of honed in on the vocals. I did like the vocals on this one because, again, he's delivering 2 new styles for this particular track. The clean vocals reminded me of one-time Candlemass vocalist Cy Markelin, and I really enjoyed the harsh vocals as well, which again are delivered in a sort of different style to what we've heard before.
Yeah. Was that it? Was that your summary? Okay,
yeah.
All right. I thought there was going to be some more after that.
I said I was okay with the track by track, but I haven't been quite as in depth as I was the Krieg one, because I thought that one you highlighted as going track by track. So I've kind of done an overall summary of this album, so I'm struggling a bit.
Okay. Well, mine's quite short here. I wrote Theatrical Doom. It's Theatrical Doom. It's nice enough, but I just didn't get into it. I don't know what, maybe it was what you said, Kirk. Is that fatigue? And because you've had, I mean, and as you said, standalone tracks, listening to these as individual singles is very different to then listening to these songs back to back. So when I got to this one, I was like, yeah, it's theatrical. It's nice atmospheric elements to it, but there wasn't anything new to kind of reinvigorate me. So I didn't find anything negative really to say about it, but I just, for whatever reason, just didn't have anything like specific to point out about the track. So I'm going to hand that over to you to see if you did, Kirk.
I thought it was going to be another formulaic song. 6 minutes and 30 seconds, so they're getting it even further down. I think they're very successful here in creating a heavy song and producing atmospherics and not just relying on high reverb either. That is one thing they're good at. And yeah, and as a standalone song, this one is quite intriguing because the first 30 seconds, you hear the keyboard drones, you just think, okay, here we go. Another 1 minute and 30 seconds of atmosphere and ambience until the guitars kick in. But the vocalist, Miguel Serra, just comes in after 30 seconds, isn't it? Which is brave of him to do that. And I think he just demonstrated he's got a strong voice, Andy. I know you said some of his cleaner vocals were poor. I would disagree. I think it takes great bravery to showcase your voice like this. And there's a real frailty to it, which I think suits the music, certainly the sorrowful aspects of it. There's some really hysterical, like gobbling death metal type vocals towards the end as well. Did anyone pick up on that? That was just so strange, which is a good thing because I was expecting this to be another song like all the others, and it was a bit more left field. But at this point in the album, I really couldn't care. So as a standalone song, analysing it now, I enjoyed it. Where it stands as a body of work on the album, you've already lost me because it's just too long, this record.
Okay. Well, we get to the last song, Eral, a song for Nell. Andy.
On our discussions, I'm sure you know well enough by now. I love female metal vocals.
Yeah.
Across the whole range, from Taja of Nightwish and all the Nightwish girls to Liv Christine to the Sarah Jezebel diva who comes in and accompanies Cradle of Filth, the Paradox and Anathema albums that had sort of soprano vocalists.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, any one of those would have been a better inclusion for this final track. I mean, for context, it's sort of just female vocals throughout. Our man Miguel sort of sits this one out and just didn't do anything for me. Again, I said it was a pleasure to review this album, but I might have been struggling at this point. If it'd been earlier on in the album, or if I'd listened to it as a standalone track, I might have enjoyed it more. But I didn't think the female vocals on this were particularly spectacular. Sort of not on par with her peers, and maybe a sort of strange way of closing it as well, closing the album. We've they could have releases and maybe tracks differently, but I don't think this is a strong way of closing what is overall an excellent album. I've been quite negative at times, but I did really enjoy this album and what this band produces.
Okay. So for me, I kind of think this could have been placed better in the maybe like track 4 or something like that to help break the album up. If you're listening tracks 1 to 8 or however, 1 to 8, then you would have that would give your ears a change. Luckily for me, so when I put this on, I perked up because it was something different. I was like, oh, okay, hang on. I got a little bit more re-energized. Now, vocally, I liked her vocals. There wasn't anything amazing about them. There wasn't anything that kind of made me think she was an absolutely outstanding singer, but there was nothing wrong with them. They sounded a little compressed, if anything, to me. So it felt like they were a little bit like she was purposely restricting her voice. So she wasn't using like 25% of her vocal range, and she was, for whatever reason, holding back. She also reminded me a little bit of Kristen from Benfic Realm. Her clean vocals is what it kind of reminded me about. It's a very slow track, but I thought it was very beautiful, very emotional. And I even liked the fact that there was a really nice bass line lead. So we talked about lead guitar melodies. There was a lovely bass line lead throughout this track. And it was such a difference to what we've heard on the previous songs. I was grateful for this. I think maybe it was because I was like, having done all those other tracks, I was like almost getting to that last song going, oh God, it's going to be another doom death heavy 9-minute track. And this came in, I was like, okay, something a bit different. And I actually was able to kind of cleanse my palate, if you like, and be able to reapproach it. So I really like the track. I don't know if I listen to these as singles, would it stand out? I don't know now. But as listening as part of an listening experience, it was actually very, very useful to have. But maybe a bit earlier on in the album would have been better to help break up the continuation of the sort of doom death 9, 10, 8, 7, whatever minute songs that you've got. Kirk.
Great way to end the album. I'll echo what you said. I almost feel grateful at this point that they're putting something on. The vocals, it always reminds you of that woman who's quite pretty but has low self-esteem, and she's not aware of the fragile beauty. And this is like the vocal equivalent, isn't it? It really works. No, it does. And Yeah, I picked up on the bass as well. It reminds me of that debut Smashing Pumpkins album, Gish, where
Okay, yeah.
Billy Corgan hands the mic over to Darcy and she has this song called My Daydream. And I think, oh, what a wonderful way to end it. Very much like this. Stripped down. And you're right, the voice, she's not doing anything spectacular, but there's a real, fragility to it. Sorrow, as you would expect on a Death Doom album.
Yeah.
If we just dropped track number 5 and 6 from this album, reduced it to 6, and then had this as the finale, this would be a phenomenal record, in its genre. It really would. So they took me by surprise here. They probably needed another song like this as a transition piece on the album, as a chronological listening experience at, say, track 4 or even track number 3 after you've had the monumental Vessel part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Good ending to this song. To this album, and they almost brought me back into the fold.
Okay, well, we need to score it. So when we do our scores, we'll also get our overall feedback from each of us at the same time. So we score out of 4 categories. It's either a bin it if we think it's a bad album, a trade it if we think it's okay but just not for us, if we think it's a good album, it's a stream it, and if we think it's a great album, it's a buy it. So over to Andy for final thoughts and your score, please.
Well, this album's an excellent example of the Death Doom genre. Very talented musicians and songwriters. It's not my sort of thing that it's not something I think should fit into this particular style of music. The virtuoso guitar playing of the first 2 tracks in particular, but don't take that away from the guy's talent. Overall, the mood of misery and sorrow is delivered. It's what you'd expect. There's a lot of elements to the songs and the vocal delivery. Lots of different variations in his style, both harsh and clean. Not all work for me. Some obvious influences from various bands, and there have been some sort of negative comments for me throughout. But overall, it's a buy it for me. I really did enjoy the album as a whole piece of work. I didn't listen to individual tracks. My reviews and my listens were start to finish straight through. And I didn't think it was grueling as long as perhaps you two thought, to be honest. But overall, an excellent piece of music.
Okay. For me, it's an interesting one because you usually get like an 8 or 9 track album, and there'll be 4 or 5 minute song lengths. It is the average kind of sort of thing you'll get. So I don't know how common it is for sort of 9-minute, 10-minute song Death Doom bands to put out 8 tracks, or would they normally put out 6 tracks on an album? I don't really know what the common sort of practice would be, but it did feel a little bit bloated overall. But I think, as we said, we've said numerous times, as the songs as individual tracks work really well. As a body of work from start to finish, it's a lot harder to go through. I love the atmospheric intros they used on the songs. I did like all the midsection breaks because it helped break the song, but it definitely feels like, as I said, they're using this kind of a blueprint of a 2-parter. So they always had this big kind of slower intro, and then they love to bring up the tempos in the second half. I really like the sound of this album. There was a really good sound mix. The bass tone if there's a few parts in some of the songs where you hear just the bass, and he's got the nastiest, dirtiest bass tone, which I really loved in the mix of the overall album. And I like the fact that the guitar leads were kept simple when they were just doing lead melodies, not so much on the solos, but on the lead melodies where they were just doing almost vocal melody lines. They added great texture without being too show-offy, which I like. I don't like when guitarists just kind of start doing guitar wanking. It's a bit annoying. I'm really divided on my opinion on this one, because part of me goes, all the songs make it a buy it, but actually you'd be better in a stream it format because you could just listen to them individually as singles. But as an overall body of work, there's only one song that I probably wouldn't listen to again, so I'm gonna have to say it's a buy it. Kirk.
Too long, this album. There are certain bands where you demand 60 minutes or more. Tool, Dream Theater, Tesseract, Periphery, Neurosis. Solnegre are not one of those bands. They've got 2 albums worth of material here. Very poor judgment when it comes to editing that material. too many superfluous long intros, excellent guitar work, fantastic vocals at times throughout this, good appreciation for song dynamics. And yeah, if this was 40 minutes long, this would be a clear buy it. However, I would definitely trade this album. I will never listen to it again. Too long. However, I keep saying that word. If they just made an EP out of track 1 and 2 and then separated the rest into an album, that would be perfect. So I do like this band. I just think they've shown poor judgment here for their debut, expecting people to sit through more than 60 minutes of My Dying Bride worship at times. So yeah, not for me. I'll definitely give their other material a go. I hope it's just not as long, the next record. So it's a trade it for me. And if I trade it with Andy, please do not give me a Mournful Congregation album in return.
Okay, so there we go. So that's Solnegre and the Spiral Labyrinth, which as an overall, because of mine and Andy's score, does get a buy it from the A.D.K Rock and Metal channel. Now, if you like this video, please do like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on another video sometime very soon. Take care.